Welcome on into the Triangle and Two show. I'm Fernandez. He's Mark Bergin. WRAL Triangle and Two. Today we're going to be talking about the Masters, obviously. We're going to be talking about some NFL quarterback rankings, what the Panthers are going to be doing. But we will start things off with the transfer portal news and Caleb Love deciding to go to Michigan. Mark Bergin, Luis Fernandez. Mark, Caleb Love. Obviously, we've known for quite some time he was going to be leaving. He entered the transfer portal, the tumultuous season in general, blah, blah, blah. We've heard all of that already. But what does this news mean to you? How do you interpret this? Do you think it's going to be a good fit in Michigan? Let's talk about the Caleb Love stuff.
Caleb Love is going to be tasked with getting the Wolverines back into the tournament, Lewis. And I'm not talking the NIT. Now, I know a lot was made this past season with the Tar Heels missing out on the NCAA tournament, opting not to play for the NI and the NIT. But the Michigan Wolverines now are going to try to get back on track, led by Juwan Howard. He's been there for several years now after John Beilein taken over in Ann Arbor. Lewis, I thought you had a great tweet, though. I don't want to wish my life away. Come November, though, you got two of these teams playing basketball in paradise.
Yeah.
The Tar Heels, the Michigan Wolverines, battle for Atlantis. How epic would it be while we're carving Thanksgiving turkey? We get to see Caleb Love go against his former squad. That is in play at this moment in time, and I cannot wait.
Oh, I don't think Caleb Love harbors any kind of ill will towards UNC. I mean, it feels pretty obvious that this was kind of a mutual decision. You know what I mean? I think it's both groups, Caleb Love and UNC, are going to be better off after splitting ways here. But still, I mean, he's an athlete. And if there's one thing athletes love to do, it's find motivation. It's to find that big old chip to put on their shoulder. So Caleb Love is definitely going to find that. Honestly, from his perspective, one, I respect going from Jordan Brand to Jordan Brand. I respect that from Caleb Love. But also, I mean, he needs to be somewhere where he's going to be able to be a focal point of that offense. And Michigan's a great program. And, Juwan Howard has proven he's been able to take the Wolverines on a couple of deep runs here. So, I think it's going to be a good fit for Caleb Love, depending, of course, on what the rest of the roster looks like for Michigan. They've lost a couple of folks as well.
Yeah, the third player to transfer to Michigan, though, this offseason, I'm curious to see how the Tar Heels fill the scoring void that Love leaves behind, because he was the team's leading scorer this past season, despite some of the inefficiencies. Now, here's what it's going to be, though, Lewis, is if the Tar Heels have success, what's the common denominator with Baycott and Davis coming back? It's, is it Love that was the problem? Is the conversation going to turn to say, he's the common denominator, he's the scapegoat for the lack of success? I don't think that's fair. I don't think that takes into account the glue and the floor spacing that Brady Manick brought to the table that the Tar Heels point blank period did not have this past season in trying to get back to the title game, and they don't even make the NCAA tournament. So I think that Caleb Love should be remembered favorably in Chapel Hill. He's the K-Slayer. He ended Coach K's 42-year run
K-Slayer
in the Final Four, Lewis. You couldn't have written a Hollywood script that would be believable. No. One of the most iconic shots, not only in the history of the NCAA tournament, but in the Battle of the Blues, Duke UNC. He should be remembered favorably for his time in Chapel Hill, Lewis.
I agree, and I'm sure. I think he will be. Time will pass, and I think he will be. But I do want to put this out into perspective, because you talked a little bit about he was the leading scorer, right? And yes, that is true. I think it was in Brendan Marks wrote an article a week or two ago, kind of just recapping everything and summarizing things. He spoke with Caleb Love's dad, and one of the things that he said was, who else was going to shoot the ball? And I think that's fair. They really didn't have, besides from an outside presence, right? Pete Nance struggled. He was not, I think, the perfect fit in kind of that stretch four that UNC was hoping he would be to fill that Brady Manick role. RJ Davis had a lot of great moments, but also struggled down the stretch. He had some injuries that he was dealing with, which I think really impacted him in the second half of February and in March. And then Armando Baycott is, a great, and is going to be remembered as one of the most prolific players to ever play at UNC, especially because of how long he's been there. But at the same time, there's only so much that you can do as a big in terms of scoring. So Caleb Love had to take shots, but it's the efficiency, man. I was just weird before we got started. I was looking at some of these. I've heard this floated around, but just to really put this in perspective, right? So Caleb Love, 16.7 points per game. He shot 37.8% from the field and 29.9% from three. Let's round up to 30% there, okay? So from the field, he had 497 shots and made 188. Armando Bacot averaged 15.9 points per game. He had 334 shots, so that's 163 shots less than Caleb Love, and made 185 field goals. That is 3 less field goals than Caleb Love made. Like, so a lot of the shots, it's like, okay, I know someone needs to take them, but if you distribute them out a little bit better, if you let more people do what they need to do, the hope is you're getting more of those efficient shots that like Armando Bacot would have been able to provide. RJ Davis, we'll use him as another example here, right? We go to the 3-point percentage now. Caleb Love shot 244 threes. RJ Davis shot 174 threes. He was 36% from three. So you're looking at about what? As I do math, I'm head of like 70 or so more threes taken. RJ Davis made 10 less threes than Caleb Love, 63 to 73. So
hang on, Lewis. These are all great stats. Let me jump in here.
Yeah.
We mentioned Pete Nance trying to fulfill that role of Brady Manick, and whether he did that or not, fine. You can't just blame it all on one player. Who's the player we're not talking about right now? And that's Leaky Black. And this is no knock on Leaky Black as an athletic wing, but consistently from the outside, if you're not going to get that 3-point shooting from Pete Nance, it has to come from another player. Leaky Black has just never been that player at the college level. The hope would be for Leaky Black if he goes into the pros, and we've talked about this off the air too, Lewis, with that he could be a 3-and-D guy, but he needs to go to a right NBA franchise or organization that can help with that shooting ability, that catch and shoot ability that you would seek from him, because he's like 6'9". He's got the length and athleticism that you would want from a wing. But if you're not going to get that outside shooting from another player other than RJ Davis, who's it going to be? And that goes into the floor spacing problems that I mentioned earlier.
And that's totally fair. And I think that's totally fair. The whole point of Leaky as a member of that starting five was he was going to give you great defense, and he was going to make the, occasional corner three. He wasn't going to be the kind of person who was going to go out there and score all these points. But when you have a player like that in your rotation, you also have to be able to bounce that out from an offensive perspective. So does that mean the rest of your starting five have to be great shooters, or at least better shooters? Does that mean that you need to get some good shooting off of the bench? And this is, I think, what we'll learn a lot about UNC next year is this whole roster construction perspective, right? They've lost so many players. Hubert was really not playing that deep of a bench. So was that because of, the players who were on the bench, or is that more of like just Hubert Davis's coaching style? That's what we're going to learn more about UNC moving forward. And that's what's going to be so critical, because you're right. Like, having RJ and Armando Bacot back is going to be big for UNC, but they are going to need more scoring. And so they're starting to get some of those pieces coming in through the transfer portal. But, the question is it going to be enough? How is all of that going to get together? Because Armando Bacot is fantastic, and obviously, has been almost the ACC Player of the Year twice now. But I do think he's not as explosive as like some of these other bigs that we think of in UNC history. So the better the spacing is, the better it is for Armando Bacot.
And the players we just mentioned, Lewis, are just the starters. So if you're not going to get that outside shooting and that efficiency that you need to play at a high level, does it then come from your bench from a sixth man, whether that's Puff Johnson? So my point being, Lewis, I don't mean to single out one single player, but it's the accountability of we and not me, just one individual player. And bringing this back to Caleb Love, Lewis, it's, okay, if the Tar Heels have success, and I expect them to get back to the tournament next season.
Yeah.
When they have success, I don't want the common denominator to be, it was Caleb Love's problem, when that is an oversimplification of what was happening this past season with the Tar Heels.
Yeah, the efficiency is definitely a big part of it, but you can't just blame Caleb Love for all the issues that UNC had. I don't think that's fair. And I know hopefully he has a lot of success at Michigan. They lost their top 3 scorers, with 2 going to the draft and then Hunter Dickinson going into the transfer portal. So there's a lot of opportunity for him to prove himself. I think his tweet that he put out there said something along the lines of like, rewrite your story. Caleb Love's going to have the opportunity to do that. 2 years of eligibility left, and I hope at least everyone in the Triangle is wishing him nothing but the best moving forward, because he's a great talent, a great player. And so the question is, can you just, round that out a little bit more from the efficiency perspective?
Luis Fernandez, the UNC alum, obviously the shot in the Final Four against Duke, but how will you remember Caleb Love?
I will remember Caleb Love from, obviously the shot at the Final Four, but I think it's more about a feeling. And that feeling with Caleb Love is, I remember there's the Syracuse game specifically in 2022. This was before, obviously the game where they beat Duke in Cameron Indoor at the end of the season. So UNC is on the bubble, but they are trending on the right side of the bubble. But they're also, it's a very precarious position. So they need these wins. The Syracuse game comes down to the final, few seconds, the final few possessions. Caleb Love pulls up from a deep three on the final possession with just a few seconds left. And the entire Dean Smith Center kind of, you almost feel like no, don't do it. Like that type of moment. And then he drains the three and UNC ends up winning. So I think that kind of moment, I think, is a great microcosm of Caleb Love's career at UNC, where he has this just the greenest of green lights to do whatever he wants. And sometimes that did not work out, but a lot of times he did hit some really incredible shots that I think will be well remembered, at least in the next few years for UNC.
If he cleans up his efficiency, I could see him being a great heat check guy off the bench as like a sixth man in the NBA.
He's already the epitome of the heat check. It's just a matter of do those heat checks start to go in.
Lewis, I want to tell a quick personal story. We'll go on. When I first moved here a little bit more than a year ago, I went to a North Carolina Louisville game in Chapel Hill, and I had to triple check that it was for men's basketball because the tickets were $8, and you have two perennial top 10 teams that year were just down. I believe Chris Mack, the Louisville coach, had gotten fired mid-season, and it was like, well, the Tar Heels will make the tournament, but it'll be more on legacy. And they went on a run, and we had a terrific time at the Dean Dome. And that was my introduction to basketball in the Triangle a little bit more than a year ago, a February game where I got in to Chapel Hill at the arena for $8 a ticket. So that was my introduction. It was fantastic. And so that's kind of how I'll remember him. And then they go on their run and they go to the title game. They're minutes away from winning the national championship. And then here we are a year later. They don't even make the NCAA tournament. I do expect them to regroup. And I'm going to say this again, and I'll say this before. Be patient with Hubert Davis, because while it might not be great Final Four level status this upcoming season, the year after, you've got the number 2 recruiting class in the country coming in. So be patient with Hubert Davis. You're not going to win the national title every year. I do expect the Tar Heels to get back into the NCAA tournament, though, in 2024.
Okay, so speaking of tickets going for $8, let's go ahead and transition now to a team that I'm assuming the tickets are going to be a lot more expensive because of just how much everything has changed, the Carolina Panthers. So, Mark, we are, April 10th. We're recording on April 10th if you're watching on a different date. And we are, a little more than 2.5 weeks away from the NFL draft. The Panthers are on the clock. I have that, ESPN NFL draft, little ding, 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 like that little tone stuck in my head. I'm tone deaf, so forgive me on that part. But it's interesting because we know it's going to be a quarterback for the Panthers. The question is just which quarterback is it going to be? So what we are going to do today is rank our top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL draft. Now, we are not scouts or anything by any means, but we do have a set of eyes and we know a little bit about football. So hopefully we can put 2 and 2 together here. So, Mark, I'm going to go ahead and let you go first. Or do you want to go first, or you want to do one?
I honestly
two?
Let's start with 1. I think we're both on the same page that Stroud's going to be the top guy, the most pro ready, has the right size that you're looking for, 6'3", about 214. Played with some stud receivers at Ohio State as well. I really don't think there's much debate for him being number 1. Number 2, Lewis, I think, is where the conversation gets interesting. Are we on the same page with Stroud, though?
Yes, I think that's fair. especially if you look at it from like a team perspective and what would fit best for the Panthers. I like CJ Stroud as one. I do think it's also kind of like the balancing of the floor versus ceiling when you compare one versus two, which I think I hope we're on the same page with two, but let's find out here.
All right.
So yes, we're on the same page with one. Who do you have as two, Mark?
All right, Anthony Richardson.
And I knew you were going to say this.
Yes,
okay.
Yes. For the Panthers specifically, here's why. I don't think Richardson's the type of prospect you would start week 1 of the 2023 season. This is where your signing of Andy Dalton comes into play to say, hey, you have an established veteran who started, more than 100 games in his career at this point, where he's your week 1 starter, and Richardson learns from a guy who has played at a Pro Bowl level in the NFL. No, Dalton isn't what he was several years ago. But it's not about this season for Richardson's development. It's when he's ready and you want to turn the keys to the Cadillac over to him. He has his size and speed is something we saw with Cam Newton, except this guy's even faster, 6'4", a 4.4 40. Like, he will force defenses to be accountable and to play 11 on 11. It's not your traditional drop back in the pocket passer. You're able to design packages for him, RPOs, read option plays that take advantage of his speed. That can't be the only component of his game, Lewis. But the analogy I'd make to you is to hit a home run, you've got to swing for the fences. This is a swing for the fences. He doesn't have a ceiling. He might not have a floor either, but it's the size and speed. It's how the quarterback position is played in 2023 and beyond. Go to the Super Bowl, right? Chiefs are driving down on the final drive of the game, and it was Mahomes' 26-yard scramble that put the Chiefs in a position to put that game away against the Eagles. It's a component and facet of the quarterback position to be able to use your legs to make plays. That's not always to scramble. And I think Richardson would have the ability to do that. Again, is he going to be ready week 1? That's probably what you want with the first pick. I just think there's higher upside. I could sell you on the downside of Bryce Young, but we'll get into that here in a little bit, Lewis.
So I think Anthony Richardson is so interesting to me because there are a lot of people who, I follow, subscribe to, all of that kind of stuff, who know football a lot better than I do. And I feel as if, as we move further and further closer to the NFL draft, more and more of those people are starting to say, Anthony Richardson, let's talk about it. Like, let's have a conversation here. I would do tiers with my top 5 quarterbacks, right? I think that you have tier 1 is the guys who I think are going to be, Pro Bowl caliber, who could definitely come in, have a lot of success in the NFL, who I feel like are there is less, there's less concern with them. You know what I mean? It feels like that floor is higher. And I think that's CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. I have Bryce Young as my 2. But Anthony Richardson, to me, in terms of tiers, is more like this wild card tier, where I think that we aren't giving Anthony Richardson enough credit for what foundation he already has, what mechanics he already has. He has the ability to play really well from the pocket. He has a good pocket presence, and I think that's kind of forgotten about sometimes because of his athleticism, because of his size. His accuracy, I think it's almost there. It's the kind of thing where you tweak a couple of basic mechanics and his accuracy could improve. So to me, I look at Anthony Richardson and I keep saying the exact same thing this entire offseason, which is that to me, it's like a Patrick Mahomes-esque situation. That's just recency. I'm not trying to say he's going to be Patrick Mahomes, but it's the kind of thing where if he gets drafted early, goes to a team that has a good offensive system around it, has a good coaching staff, they can train him, they can help build him, and so you don't rush him into starting. I do think Anthony Richardson very well could start week 1. I do think that is a possibility. But I do think that it may be better off for him to have a little bit of time to grow and learn. Bringing up Andy Dalton, I think, is a great example. But this is one of those situations where sometimes picking number 1, if there is not a for sure number 1 guy, is almost harder because you have to make a decision.
Yes.
Versus
I'm with you there.
Make a decision for you. You know what I mean? So if let's say now here's if this is the situation, right? Let's say CJ Stroud goes 1, Bryce Young goes 2, and then the Cardinals are up at 3. They have Kyler Murray. They're not going to pick a quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
So then you have one of these higher tier teams. Maybe it's the Colts who pick 4. Maybe it's some of these other teams who are further back. They have the opportunity to trade up a Cardinals roster that is very bad right now. So the Cardinals get more picks. They trade up. And then you have a team who may be more likely to take a flyer on Anthony Richardson. Maybe, the picks drop a little bit and someone gets him like in the top 10, top 15. You don't know. What I'm saying is like, I hear everything you're saying, and it would not shock me if Anthony Richardson ends up being one of the better quarterbacks in this class. But it's so hard. It's so hard to know, because I do think with any of these quarterbacks, it's going to be what system do they go to. But my number 2 is Bryce Young. A big walk around way to say that. I do think that obviously the size is a big issue, right? And we've talked a lot about the notion of like, sometimes there are rules and then there are exceptions to those rules. And it's hard to just say that every good quarterback in college that is like 5'10" and a little bit around 200 pounds is going to be the exception to that rule, is going to be the Drew Brees, is going to be the Russell Wilson to that rule. So, that is a little bit tricky, especially when you're thinking number 1 overall. But I think if you were to remove size from the equation and just compare everything else, that's a big part of the equation, I know. But if you do that, a lot of people are going to put Bryce Young over CJ Stroud.
Yep.
I think that if the Panthers feel confident in their ability to protect him, I think that I could totally see Bryce Young going number 1 overall. But to me, it's Stroud 1, Young 2, and that's like tier 1 of the quarterbacks. And one thing too, I know I've talked a lot, but one thing too here, when you look at the draft, when you look at like the books and stuff like that, right? I'll use DraftKings as an example. Last week, it's been Stroud at like minus 110 or something like that. And then like next up has been like Young at like plus 100 or something like that. So, essentially for the number 1 pick in the draft. So it's been like Stroud, Young, Stroud has been the favorite. Last week, it shifted for a little bit where they were both sitting at minus 110. And so essentially it was a toss up. And now if I go to DraftKings and look at their sports book for the number 1 pick in the draft, Bryce Young, I think this may have even changed from
we got breaking news here on WRAL Triangle and Two.
No. Oh, wow. Okay. So maybe I looked at it incorrectly, but right now, when I look at it, Bryce Young is sitting at minus 120 and CJ Stroud is sitting at minus 105. So that's as of, according to this, that's as of Thursday. Oh, no, this is talking about the NFL draft. So yeah, they have Bryce Young at minus 120 and CJ Stroud at minus 105 right now. So technically, Bryce Young would be the favorite to get the pick. But that's what I'm saying, right? Right now, it's gone from this clear CJ Stroud as the favorite to a bit more of a toss-up between CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. I don't think you can go wrong with either one of them as the quarterback, but I do think it's going to be more about what you do to build around them if they will ultimately have success. I'm sorry. That was a lot of talk.
You're fine. So Young would be my 3, and the recipe of success for him is get 5 bodyguards in front of him. So if it is the Panthers that draft him, okay, what did the Panthers do last year? They brought in Ike Ekwonu to serve as an anchor on an offensive line to protect the blind side of whoever your quarterback is. You're going to need him and 4 other studs up front to be able to keep your rookie QB upright. Now, you can say that about any rookie QB, but most first-round picks aren't 5'10", 204. Like, I don't know if it's like a 204 of what his playing weight will be, Lewis. No. But, you mentioned Drew Brees. You mentioned Russell Wilson. Those are the exceptions, not the norm when it comes to not young rookie quarterbacks, but undersized quarterbacks that have success in the NFL.
Yeah, that's all. That's going to be the concern that follows Bryce Young, regardless. Even if he has a lot of success his rookie year, even if he, has a great start to his career, anytime injuries start to mount, anytime he misses a game because he gets hit or something along those lines, that's when the questions will
Brees had a shoulder injury early in his career. Another quarterback with a similar build, Tua Tagovailoa, he's had his share of injuries early on in his career as well. So it's not to say Bryce Young is either of those quarterbacks. It's what his history shown us with the quarterback of that stature. I don't include Russell Wilson at Russell Wilson's thick.
He's big.
He's a little bit of a different little bit of a different mold than
Well,
Bryce Young. So do you have Richardson at 3, Lewis? And we'll keep this rolling.
I do have Richardson at 3, but Richardson to me is almost like he's like a wild card tier where like I
Yes.
feel like he's truly just kind of like floating ethereally. And I will say too, one thing about Russell Wilson, Wilson was always so good and I still think is like this at avoiding hits. He knows when to slide. He knows when to get down. He knows when to get out of bounds. Like I remember because he came
baseball player. That's why, Lewis.
Exactly.
Player.
Yeah. Exactly. So something to keep in mind. 4. Who do you have?
Levis out of Kentucky. I think if he goes to the right team, you get the cannon arm, the prototypical size that you look for in an NFL quarterback. Everyone was sleeping on Justin Herbert several years ago when it was Joe Burrow and Tua ahead of him. And Herbert could end up being the best of the bunch. I'm not saying he will be, but he could in that 2020 class. Lewis, you said something earlier, and this is not the flashy thing to say. I think franchise coaching, head coaching, offensive coordinator, quarterback coach, and personnel is a lot more important than an individual prospect's ability. There are exceptions to that, no doubt. But if Levis goes to the right team and the right system and the right fit, he could have success. That's like what I'm trying to do for our listeners and viewers, Lewis, is lay out what's the map, what's the roadway for success for each of these quarterbacks. I'll take Levis out of Kentucky at 4.
So my thing with Will Levis is I can't trust him because he puts mayo in his coffee and he eats bananas without peeling them. Like that's sicko behavior. Number one. No, but so I do agree. Will Levis is going to need to go somewhere where he can grow. I look at, so in my pick at number 4, I'll just go ahead and say this, is Hendon Hooker. And I think I look at like the ascension in college, right? Hendon Hooker was someone who continued to get better. I think that, Will Levis may kind of offer a little bit more of upside just because of, we haven't seen what his peak is yet. And he has such great physical attributes as a cannon of an arm, but he really struggled last year, especially with some of these interceptions. And when I look at Hendon Hooker, he's someone who his growth going from Virginia Tech to Tennessee was just ridiculous. And I know some people are going to criticize, Heupel and that offensive system for kind of being just very quarterback friendly. And I think that's fair. But what Hendon Hooker had to do was a lot of, post-snap decision-making, especially when throwing deep. And so because of that, I think he may be a little bit of a step ahead. Obviously, the ACL injury is tough. He is older. So depending on how much you value that, I know just in general, a lot of people like, athletes who have like a high like RAS score who are trending upward in terms of athleticism, who are young, who are going to grow into their body still. And, I think the prime example is like Jamar Chase, right? Who was dominating people like 19 years old, takes that year off, tests amazingly. He's like 20 years old. And now he's had a couple of, all pro, if not all pro like seasons. And he's 22, I think. So you want to try and find those players who are athletically, who test very well and are ascending up. So that would be my only concern really with Hendon Hooker at number 4 in this list. But I put Hooker at 4, Levis at 5.
Okay. I would flip the 2. I got Levis at 4, Hooker at 5. And you mentioned the ACL and then Hooker being 25 years old, Lewis. You hit the nail on the head there. So it's like, how does he continually get better? And he's at an age where there's some quarterbacks that are 2, 3, sometimes even 4 seasons into their NFL career by the time he's entering the league.
It's the Stetson Bennett to Lamar Jackson comparison. It's like Stetson Bennett is, he's getting drafted this year. He's going to be, whatever, 26, 25 or something like that, while Lamar Jackson's played like 4 or 5 seasons and has already won MVP and all that kind of stuff.
We're talking about Stetson Bennett the 4th because there's apparently 3 other renditions of Stetson Bennett. Just for our listeners and viewers, so they know which one we're talking about here.
I will say this too, though, right? Like, so I think with these quarterbacks, I think the top 3 are going to be the ones that are going to come off the board early, and then I think the bottom 2 are going to fall later into the first round because I really think we cannot underestimate just how much hype there is around Caleb Williams and Drake May next year. Both of them are going to be incredibly talented, and I think if either one of them were available in this draft class, they would go number 1 overall. So it almost is kind of like that point. If you're a top 60, if you're picking top 16, right, and you don't see like any immediate path towards success for yourself next season as a team, do you want to invest that first round pick in a quarterback who you may end up getting another quarterback the very next year? It's like the Josh Rosen and Kyler Murray for the Cardinals way back when, where they picked Rosen in the first round and then Kyler Murray at the first pick overall like the very next year. So that is something to keep in mind as well with how these teams are picking in the first round.
Lewis, if you notice a twinkle in my eye, that's because the hair on my arm, and you can see it, it's standing up right now. Bring the Heisman to Chapel Hill. We need it here in the Triangle. Drake May and Company getting after it in 2023. Sign me up.
One step at a time. But I do think, obviously it's going to be between those two, but like, I think that Caleb Williams, because he's playing in LA, I think is automatically going to have a little bit of a head start, but it'll be interesting to see.
Lewis, let's move on. We had the Masters this weekend. Jon Rahm getting it done. Terrific weekend. A lot of rain, so we had more golf as we went on and on into the weekend. And Rahm going on his run on Sunday. I hope you had a terrific holiday weekend. Just what were your impressions from golf's best tournament this past weekend?
I do agree that it's golf's best tournament. No, it's interesting because that the weather obviously played a major factor, and I think that's what makes Jon Rahm's win even more impressive because he had to deal with that on Saturday. So he's so interesting because he's just kind of been ascending in the past few years, especially winning the U.S. Open in 2021. The Masters is his fourth PGA tournament win this year. So he's had a lot of success. He won the Genesis Open Invitational, however it's phrased, back in February, which a lot of people were looking at as to like, okay, that was the last time Tiger competed. How does he respond from that? So really impressed with Jon Rahm. Good for him. A lot of character. He plays with, I think a lot of passion, a lot of fire that I don't think we're entirely used to with golf. And I think that's one of the best things about him. I was reading an article put together by Action Network earlier today. And they said one of the best moments was afterwards. He's being asked about, hey, you were one of the favorites coming into the tournament. And he said, no, I was actually third in betting odds yesterday. So, he's very much aware of this. He puts the chip on his shoulder, and I think golf continues to need more personalities that are willing to be personalities and play, out of their own body type thing. So I appreciate what Jon Rahm brought to the table. It was sad watching the physical toll playing all the holes did what it took on Tiger. Like that's just tough. He's
might be his last major, Lewis.
I don't know if it's going to be his last, but like we're much closer to the end. I think that anyone's willing to realize. It's tough.
Let me hop in here. We'll get to Tiger. Rahm was at 8-1, so the third favorite entering the tournament. And Lewis, I can say this, entering the WRAL studios today, I did not receive a pre-show text from Zach Ertz. I also did not need to dodge any downed trees either. In all seriousness, I am glad everyone's okay because it was a scary moment from this weekend. But you mentioned Tiger. The analogy I had with the people I was watching it with was almost like Michael Jordan on the Wizards, where he still shows flashes from time to time, and he was able to make the cut as it was this body that didn't hold up, but it's just not at the same level of, can you not just compete, and he's still playing at a really high level to make the cut, but are you in contention to even try to win a tournament like this? And that's where the physical toll, everything Tiger's been through with all the different various injuries he's had.
On top of the car accident, it's a lot. Well, and I think too, I don't know. I would almost relate it to kind of like Peyton Manning in his last couple of years with the Broncos, where like he knew how to read the defenses, but he physically could not throw the ball very far. Mm-hmm. His body just was not cooperating. And unfortunately in sports, time is always ticking. And so you see some of the best sports athletes out there, Father Time catching up to them. LeBron seems to be like the only exception that I can think of, like as of recently, but it's just
not sure he's human, Lewis.
No, he's not.
One other thing too, I mentioned this on our last episode too. Had Woods won the Masters, and if he ever wins it again, He'd be the oldest player ever to win the Masters. So he's going up against history. He's 47. Jack Nicklaus at the age of 46 is the oldest to win the Masters and put on the green jacket. So Tiger would be historic if he won. And you think about how many great players there are on the tour, technology, modern medicine that exists now, and to accomplish a feat like that in 2023 or back when he won in 2019, I think is even more so impressive than it was back in the 80s to accomplish the feat when Nicklaus did it. So that's just kind of where my thought process is. And for selfish reasons, I'd like to see him give it at least one more go where he makes the cut and makes it through all 4 rounds just to see what he can do. Because we said this too on our last show, Lewis, if Tiger Woods is in contention, all other storylines, whether it was Scheffler repeating, Rahm winning his first green jacket, Rory McIlroy trying to complete the Grand Slam, the disruption, and the dichotomy between the PGA and LIV, they all take second place to where if Tiger is in the mix, that is by far the number one storyline. And so for selfish reasons, I hope we get one more go around where we could play all 4 rounds and we can see what the greatest of all time could do. Yeah.
The LIV people, by the way, really competing there towards the end. I mean, Phil Mickelson and
I thought Brooks was going to do it.
I mean, he led after 36 and 54. Like, he kind of fell apart there towards the end, but the LIV golfers are definitely going to be there competitively at these majors moving forward for the rest of the year. You can see that. Also, speaking of old, like shout out to Freddie Couples for doing his thing and making the cut. The oldest player to ever make the cut. I think he beat the previous guy by like 108 days.
I saw that graphic. Yeah.
Yeah. Shout out to him. He's always been someone who, is like, it's fun to watch him play. I remember, was it the British Open a few years back where like he almost ended up winning it? But either way, he's one of those guys it's fun to see kind of continue to compete and all that stuff. He had a great quote about, he's not out there trying to compete against like the top golfers. He's just out there trying to compete against himself, which, hey, that's deep. That cuts deep. I like it.
I like that as a departing message as we wrap up here on WRAL Triangle and Two, Lewis.
Words of wisdom. Who knew? Who would have known?
Like I said, Lewis, I hope you had a terrific holiday weekend, action-packed weekend. We were blessed with the news of Caleb Love transferring on Friday. I do want to just give a shout out really quickly, Lewis, because I know you were filling in last week on the OG on 99.9 The Fan here in Raleigh. I had the chance to fill in with Joe Giglio on Friday as well. So thanks to a lot of people behind the scenes who made that happen as well. I had a lot of fun filling in and keeping the seat warm for Joe Ovies. I hope we did a serviceable job, Lewis.
I think we did okay. Much to work on, much to improve. I think we did okay.
Always.
That's going to do it for us. Thank you all so much for listening and watching. However you're doing it, be sure to come find us on the 999 YouTube page, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. New episode Mondays at 5 o'clock. I'm Luis Fernandez. He's Mark Bergin. That's going to do it for us. We'll see you next week. Y'all have a good one.